Sometimes he went to balls given by one of his sisters or one of the ministers, especially when the ball was masked. But often, even after he had promised to go, the work which he had begun prevailed. There was a fine ball given by a minister of Marine on February 23rd, 1806. At the entrance were two couriers holding lighted girandoles, which they were to cross as soon as the emperor arrived. Under the gate, the porter had other girandoles, which he was to carry before His Majesty. An immense number of people were invited, and the 6 salons of the minister were full of people whom Napoleon knew, for the list had been submitted to him. It made no difference. He made an appointment with the Minister of Finance for 8 o'clock in the evening. It will be time enough to go to the ball at 10 o'clock, said he. At 8 o'clock, therefore, they were both scrutinizing the budget. About midnight, there was a scratching at the door of the cabinet. It is a page dispatched by the Empress, who sends word that the ball is charming and that the Emperor is impatiently waited for. "On good time," replied he in a loud voice. "Tell the Empress that I'm at work with the Minister of Finance. We're coming." An hour after, another message. The same answer. He continues to work. The clock strikes. "What o'clock is that?" "3 o'clock, sire." "Oh, good God. It's too late for us to go to the ball. What do you think about it?" "That is quite my view." "Then let us each go to bed. Well," added he gaily at the moment when the minister was leaving him, "many people think that we pass our lives in amusing ourselves, and as Orientals say, eating sweetmeats. Good night, minister." No distraction, no pleasure, no gratification of the senses prevailed over work. Many anecdotes are known which prove it, and yet, when he does amuse himself, it is unreservedly. He danced in private, at least up to 1807, but only country dances. The waltz which he tried to learn in 1810 at the time of his marriage with Marie Louise made him giddy. His very modern attainments as a dancer, which he owed to his teacher at Valence, M. Dutel, led him to prefer before everything a figure which was danced at the end of balls, and which was called the grand pere. It was the cotillion of the period, a cotillion which opened with promenade, as long as the leading couple wished, and which continued the figures arranged by them, the ladies seated in an armchair and dancers on their knees, cradles made with the arms. Any pretty ideas which came into mind. "I shall return for the grand pere," said he, and as a matter of fact, he often did so. If he went to the play, it was only to see one act. Most frequently on those occasions he made his appointments for 9 o'clock and kept them punctually. If he stayed longer, it was only till 10 o'clock, which was the usual hour of the official coucher, which corresponded with the levee, but was much less important and less numerous. The chamberlain handed to him the list of persons who were in the first salon, introduced the grand entrées and then service. The emperor gave his orders briefly and then retired into his interior apartment, into which he now and then took one of his aides-de-camp to chat a little longer, and throwing off his clothes in a careless way and dress, assisted only by his valets de chambre. Often after he had gone to bed, he asked for the empress to come and read to him, or else he chatted with one of his most trusted friends. Sometimes he then went to sleep. The story is well known at Talleyrand, passing a whole night on a sofa, the emperor having dropped off in the middle of a conversation, but it was very exceptional, almost without example, that he slept all through the night, or that the whole amount of his sleep exceeded 3 hours. When he woke up, even suddenly, and against his wishes, he was as much himself again as if he had been awake. "Presence of mind after midnight so complete with me," said he, "that if I'm woke up by sudden circumstances, I'm wide awake. I get up so that no one can guess by the state of my eyes if I have just been asleep, and my dictation is as fresh as at any given moment of the day." One night he ordered Autorive to come and work at 11 o'clock. Autorive is punctual, but an hour after midnight he was still not admitted. All the people about the chateau had made their arrangements for the night and were asleep. Autorive has the aide-de-camp on duty awakened, and he goes in to Napoleon and asks for orders. He is in bed. There's been a misunderstanding. It must have been for tomorrow at 11 o'clock. But is it 11 in the morning or at night? The aide-de-camp returns and receives orders to introduce Dr. Napoleon is seated on his bed in his dressing gown with a bandana on his head. He's perfectly gracious, makes the chief of division sit down, takes some papers, reads them, puts questions, discusses the answers, and dictates several dispatches. He did not show a moment's impatience nor annoyance at having been twice awakened in succession. In the general way, after 3 hours of sleep which was sound, perfect, and voluntary in profound darkness, for he could not stand any light at night, and the faintest glimmer, the smallest lamp, was enough to prevent him sleeping. He rang for his valet de chambre, who was sitting up, put on his dressing gown and his drawers with feet, and went into his cabinet. If he had no settled object to work at, he did not have his secretary fetched, but sat down at his writing table and made notes on the reports of the ministers. It was his hour for figures, for the returns of the situation of his armies, those returns which were to him the pleasantest books of his library, and which he read with the greatest pleasure in his moments of leisure. At that time, in the deep silence of the sleeping palace and of Paris at rest, he stored up in his memory each of the units which formed his armies, man by man, squadron by squadron, battery by battery. He reckoned of his soldiers. He followed them along the roads of Europe. He knew up to a given point their resting places and their halts. He learned even their names.